Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the pre-award lunch and learn discussion session, Research Development Mythbusting, what it is and is not. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we start. Please note that the session is being recorded. If everyone could remain muted, that would be wonderful. If you have a question during the session, please write it in the chat box and our presenters will respond throughout the session. I'd like to introduce our speakers. Jeanne Marie Viviani is the Director of Research Development in the Division of Research at the Florida Atlantic University. And Joshua Roney is the Associate Director of Research Development in the Office of Research at the University of Central Florida. Now I'll hand it over to our presenters. How are you both doing today?
Doing great. Just got done doing the one presentation, so hopefully a lot of people on here, maybe by just a show in the chat that, you know, how many people actually saw the presentation that we just did, or maybe it'd be better to say those who didn't, because really Josh and I were just prepared to really kind of do a Q&A, but we could also touch on how we kind of got into the business of research development. Sometimes people like to hear that story too. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that would be, if you're interested in hearing, I'd love to elaborate a little more on my journey, and then I'd love to hear more, Jeannie, if you want to do that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Cool. You go first, because you know what? You did a PhD, so in my mind, I'm like, you have more bandwidth in your brain capacity than me.
I just drink so much coffee. I've got some right off screen. It's just like all the time. But I'd love to give a little bit, because I think clarity helps. So again, I was hired specifically with the focus on editing proposals. That was the thing, was check grammar, formatting, read against the guidelines, and that's it. And as I was doing that, you know, necessarily in order to be an editor, you have to look at the guidelines. And so I started learning about solicitations, RFPs, and, you know, agency guidelines. And I had a mentor and boss who was adamant about me learning this newly created thing at the time. You know, it was very young at the time, research development as a discrete field. And so I learned more about it, and I said, this is so interesting. And there wasn't really room for me to do anything else. And so what I started to do was I carved out areas that I could specialize in at our institution. So I started making templates because someone asked me one time for a template. I said, oh, this might actually be helpful. So I started making general agency templates and said, okay, here's one for NSF just getting started, and kind of digging into it. And then I said, well, you know, I could probably give a talk on, like, you know, tips for grant writing, that like stumbling blocks. And so I gave like a little timid talk about, you know, there's like a couple of people were there, and it's like, okay, this is all right. I can kind of do this. And at the same time, when I started in research development, I had a bachelor's degree in English, and that was it. And along the way, I said, I need to learn a lot more about this. So I got my master's in rhetoric and composition and learned about this whole thing of arguing with people, and how, like, you're always sort of having an argument, but an argument isn't negative. It's just,
you could have come to my house at town.
You know?
You just taught you. It would have been a problem.
But it's just, you know, yeah, I mean, it's communication with intent in mind, right? You thought about who you're talking to, and that fed into it. And then I wanted to keep going and continue my training. So I specialized in my PhD in technical communication. And that's part of a text and technology program where I learned about how teams work together using tools like Zoom and Google Drive, and did some research into that area myself. And everything I did academically at the time was to feed into doing research development better, because I knew I loved this field from pretty much the beginning, and I wanted to make a space for me to exist here. And so I really tried to be responsive when there was like an opportunity for something. So a good example, there was a need a couple of years ago for helping teams who were tracking funding to come up with a plan for, you know, are they going to go for it or not? And so I worked with somebody, and we developed a dashboard about how to import funding opportunities and kind of track them and label them and assign them. And we built this tool for people to start using. So I've never stopped trying to be responsive and like paying attention to where those needs are. But it was definitely tricky in the beginning, because it sure sounded like I was doing, you know, like what I was the only research developer. You know, there was one other person, my boss, you know, who was like strictly that. And then it has grown a lot. And now we're one of the larger teams in the state. So it's
So
been pretty exciting.
who is your boss?
Joanne Smith.
Oh,
Yeah. So she's
funny how
still at
these things
UCF in a
happen.
different role and just fantastic and a wealth of knowledge. And some of you on the call may know her. And so I was really grateful to be able to work with her and then with Deborah Reinhardt, who was my direct boss for a while until she retired recently and is enjoying that retirement life. So I've been able to be really fortunate with people who were excited about me learning new stuff and trying to be responsive to the needs of leadership and of researchers.
Wow. I mean, and so you're actually one of the rare breeds, right? That you kind of got into the office and you grew yourself in underneath that umbrella. Have you ever thought about going into like research administration outside of development, or development is just like, I'm safe, I'm happy here, I like this here?
When I was doing my initial training, there was an expectation that I would learn at least some of the fundamentals of research administration. So I had, in part of my onboarding training here, I had to complete city trainings and I had to learn about, principles of budget development and some of the aspects that I don't use every day in my work. And it has helped me in being a better developer because I think about those things in meetings. But occasionally I take on a support area that is more on the research administration side, like those internal programs. And I try to keep it with a development spin to it, but I'm able to coordinate those programs in addition to my primary role. Right. So I love it. I love that work too, but I'm really happy where I am right now, even though the specifics change a lot.
Yeah, I get asked a lot about grant writing and whether or not have I ever done grant writing before, and I kind of look at people, like the dog that's hearing a whistle. I'm like, grant writing? No idea what you're talking about. Because unlike your story, is the fact that you kind of got into it and then you built up your career around the writing, the rhetoric, the technical aspect. I'm a terrible writer. I'll admit it to anybody, day in and day out. I'm a really good editor though, and I can cut to the chase really, really fast on people's proposals. Plus being able to do the thing, I think in research development, the cool part is somebody's writing a proposal out and they're like, yeah, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And you go, have you thought about this? Because they hadn't thought about it, because you've seen so much. And you mentioned this in your presentation as well, Josh, is the fact that we don't do the same thing every single day. It literally is different all the time. It might be about the writing and the communication and everything else. But I'm learning on one day about, archaeology in Sicily, and then the next day I'm learning about microfluidics. And I think that is just like, I would never want to leave this profession because of my experiences and knowledge and things that I've gained just in working with my PIs. But, I think it was harder for me to make a transition into research development because I was a research administrator. I'm not saying that that's not something people can do, because I want to, again, this is like a myth busting thing, right? Did you have to do what Josh did, which is get a PhD in technical writing in order to be a research development? No. But did you have to do what I did, which is go through research administration to get to research development? No, I don't think that either. The difficult thing for me in making the transition into development really had to do with backing off of things that research administrators do, because I was stepping in line of like, well, I know how to do this because I did this for years. So I know that these things get submitted this way or that way, but keeping up with the pre-award stuff alone is its own thing. I give credit to pre-award people who are keeping up with those things. It may be one thing to say on a bio sketch, oh yeah, it's 3 pages now and all of this, but it's another to be able to say your synergistic activities need to be thus and such, right? So I think we compliment pre-award a lot, but I had to learn to back away from the administrative stuff, because I find myself a lot of times, because I was so cradle to grave, when I meet somebody, I'm helping them with a proposal, letting them go. Like I'm like, I find out that they got it. I'm like, yay, let's set it up, but I'm not going to help you set it up because that's not my job anymore. So, so there is kind of like a little bit of a loss when you're in research development, that you nurture these things and you let them go. And sometimes you don't, unless you go follow up, you'll never know whether or not sometimes it got funded or not. And you feel like you kind of invested this energy, but it's really heartening to have somebody come back and just say, hey, that thing that you helped me on, I got the award on that. You feel like, yeah, that's a win. So that was, I think that coming at research development from either angle works. I think it has to do with where you find your particular interest. And by the way, anybody that's in the room, if you want to ask a question in the chat box or you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, feel free. Josh and I really didn't have slides for this. We really kind of wanted to ask questions of everyone else. If there's any questions about the Florida group that we're in, we're happy to answer those. I did mention in the chat and the thing regarding the Early Career Academy. I'm happy to share screenshots of anybody wants to send me a message, and I can send you screenshots of what our academy looks like. But how many here, obviously, and I know what the answer is going to be, uses a learning management system? You know, if you use Canvas or use Blackboard or something else, this is literally all on Canvas. It is all self-directed. It's just built in such a beautiful way by the research coordinator here, Mitzi, and she just got it so like they have to go through things to get to the next thing. They can't skip anything. And so, you know, and if they don't get online, we get notified, and we're IMing it, we're sending them messages. We're like, hey, why haven't you done this? You're doing this for you. So I mean, this is a good tool, but it's not a replacement for what Josh does or what I do. Josh, what would you say about some of the training programs that you do at UCF? Because it's much bigger.
Yeah, well, we have a new faculty series that we hold that is starts in the fall, and it runs on about a monthly basis. We have a whole series related to that, but in parallel to, so and each one kind of touches on a specific area of campus or particular thing that is a wide resource to researchers. But we also have a number of mentoring programs where it's specifically for assistant professors or equivalent, where they can connect with a mentor. And we have a really neat program that we're a part of, where it matches they have an early career researcher who wants to team up with someone who's established, and there is funding that goes to the mentor to help them get ready for research, submit, and then if it's funded, they get awards through that and incentivize that. But there's a number of different mentoring programs that we're a part of here. And we also, as I said a little bit in the conversation in the last session, we have conversations with researchers a lot to see what they need, because what we've found, especially in working with early career researchers or people who are new to the institution, is we are number 703 on important things they need to know this month. And so until they need to know it, it's not going to take root. And so it's a better use of time to say, hey, we're here to help when you can, and then to touch base with them as they're getting settled in to hear, so what are you needing? Are you finding partners in research and you just need somebody to like give you some money to get started, or where do you need help? So we really try to do that a lot. Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, and Maddie's with us, and that's part of our new faculty series there.
Ooh, what can I steal, Maddie? Can I steal anything on that?
And I wanted to add also to what you were saying before, Jeannie, as we were kind of carving out our space here, it is difficult to define research development. That's why we're talking today. And it's even more so confusing to researchers, because are we the foundation people doing advancement things? Are we the research administrators? And they're, especially in the early days, we would often get someone say, okay, great. Well, I need you to build me a budget for this. This is what I want to submit. And I'll start getting you like moving into the role of the research administrator who's dedicated to them. And so we, especially in the earlier days of the team as research development, we had to be very clear to delineate what we do and why what we do matters and is separate from the stuff that research administrators do. And we had to define that with the research administrators and with the researchers, and how we conveyed ourselves online to people who are hearing about us. And that process has paid a lot of dividends. Now people they know we're a different unit than that. But that was a challenge, especially in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you spoke about your boss before, Joanne Smith. Of course, Joanne started this office as well. So she was the founder of this office back in 2018, and then left in 19, and I had to fill her shoes. But I think that the difference is Joanne was purely research development and so good at what she did But in an institution like FAU and like UCF, which is already matured and at its size and with its centers and everything else, FAU is still growing. And so we really didn't need to spend, and we didn't also have a lot of resources because the office was just growing, but we were kind of stuck in two modes. Taking faculty who've been at FAU for a long, long time, who were just interested in teaching and kind of being forced to go into the grant game and kind of teaching them, maybe doing a reboot program, how to reboot your research and apply, but also dealing with the new people. But on the other side is we had very large proposals going out the door that had zero support for those faculty. So ultimately you have to kind of make a decision, and you have to make a decision of where is the resources that you have. And I'm not, by no means, I'm no expert, but being able to say, create programs that are more self-derived, they're able to do these things. I'm expecting you as a new tenure track faculty member, these are the things you need to do. I shouldn't have to handhold you. They're also, as part of this program, they have to pick their own research mentor here. And then we're following up not only with the research mentor, the associate dean and the chair and everybody else. This person wants to do a grant. You should be helping them, right? So that this frees up this office to be able to focus on the larger strategic things that need to happen. I think it's however your office evolves to be. And like, how many people are in your office, Josh, for just development?
Maddie, help me. Is it 5? I mean, the number fluctuates. We have a faculty associate as part of our team as well, who is kind of partnering with the team. But yeah, there's myself, Maddie, who's on the call, and 3 others, and our boss.
Okay. And see, and then I remember having a conversation with Maddie too about this the other day, that it also becomes almost like as you evolve, you rub up against like turf wars. I don't want to call them turf wars, but people get like a little bit annoyed over the fact of, there are some colleges that are so good at what they do, and they have such great departmental administrators. They'll never come to your shop. They'll never come to Central because they already have all the resources they have or need in the development side. And Jennifer gave a great presentation to our executive team a couple months ago regarding decentralizing the centralized office. So I think, again, as your institution grows, saying centralized for certain things becomes almost, you can outstrip the resources. And it's incumbent upon a central office to really say, you department, whether it be engineering or something else, you need somebody on the ground that not only knows how to find funding, can read proposals. We can train those individuals. We have a research fellowship program right now that I spearheaded, which is to get departmental kind of budget people more grant administrative ready and also development ready. So this way, it's not just on me. It's kind of like teach somebody to fish kind of a thing, train the trainer. So I think it depends on the institution size. It depends on where you're growing, because UCF, you're still growing. What's your expenditures like right now, Josh?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, we're 220 million in research awarded last year, but we're experiencing some of the things you're talking about too. And as we've developed as a team, we used to have an approach that said, anybody come here, we will help you with anything unless there's someone else who's already helping you. That was sort of the way we shared is what we were doing, and that very quick, like that gets a good response, and a lot of people took advantage of that. And after a while, it maxes out our capacity completely, and then you have to not help other people or not have a life outside of work. And so we started to shift those things and be clear with which things can we put and to speak for us in terms of recorded resources or prepared resources to say, there it is. Like, I don't have to teach you about the tool because there's already me teaching you about the tool in this, in this talk you could do. And so we took the things we could and made them so that when they talk to us, it's about something that needs an interpersonal interaction. And in addition to that, we also established, we've been doing this, Maddie, I think it's about 3 years now, where we have a standing meeting with the research administrators in the units as a group once a month. And we talk not only about changes and things that are happening in the central office, not from an administrative perspective, although sometimes we'll get those questions in, but about things that we're providing and offering. And we don't have a philosophy to say, here are the things that we're reaching out to your faculty for, because there are people who are great at finding funding or even reviewing proposals, or they have their own internal mentoring program. But we try very hard to make sure we're tailoring what we say and what we do with the context in mind. So these researchers have a dynamite team with these things, so we're not going to offer those because they already got them. And so we've tried really hard to continue to maintain that.
Or sometimes even learning from those individuals that are successful and how they're creating a system around it to support the faculty that are within that unit as well. I've learned a lot of things from active administrators here at FAU on how they keep their faculty going, even if it's from a pre-award standpoint of bio sketches or something else. It's good to know, because then when I'm reaching out and creating and developing training courses, what I'm trying to convey to any faculty member is, have these things done. Your department administrator is going to want you to do it anyway, and I'm cutting to the chase and telling you need to do it anyhow. So Lorelei mentioned too, how do you support disciplines that don't have many funding opportunities available to them, like arts and humanities or business? You want to take that first, Josh?
Sure, I'll take a run at that. So we would try a couple of things. Number one is make sure that there's an interest at all levels. For example, our College of Business, the people who are tenure earning are focused on scholarship and not on seeking funding. And that is demonstrated in the fact that not a big number of them are seeking funding until they're tenured. And so we're informed on that. But we use tools like Web of Science to see where funding is. Funder acknowledgements in scholarship is an expectation. So scholarship resulting from a grant or an award, you acknowledge them in the publication. Web of Science indexes that. So we say, find some scholarship that matters for your area, and let's look at the funder acknowledgements. We also help people to plan on teaming with research teams where there is maybe more traditional lines of funding. So can they be part of an interdisciplinary team and contribute as part of that, and thinking about the research in that? That's not going to work in all cases. An archaeologist is very, very specific in what they can do, but there are more opportunities like that. And we also, if there is a limited pool, we'll try to make sure that they are aware of and connecting with the people who have a lot more experience working with and developing relationships with foundations, where it's a donor sort of or a gift sort of thing, because there's a team that specializes in that that's separate from ours.
Yeah, and you hit on all the high points, and we can repeat that over and over again to arts and letters and arts and humanities and business folks all the time. In fact, what I think our College of Business does, and that's where our economics folks are too, because I think it depends on disciplines too. Some disciplines are within different colleges. So our economics is underneath business. But our economists just need, literally, our economists just need a data set, and then they can publish in their high quality journals. And that's what's going to, by the way, if you don't know what the promotion and tenure system is like at a particular college level, you're missing out, because that is how you really get to understand what is important to them and what is not. If they do not need to get a grant in order to get tenure, they'll never darken your door unless they have some ingrained passion about wanting to go for funding. If they don't need it, they're not going to do the extra work. It's also human nature. They're just not going to do it. So if all they need to do is publish, kind of like what Josh had said, they just find the journal articles, and then when they're tenured, what's funny is that I want to kind of pivot off of that too, Josh, because a lot of times, whether they're tenured or not, most of the business folks, they're making side money. They have side hustles. They're doing consulting and business strategy stuff. And more than anything else, you have to worry about them, a conflict of interest, because they're doing stuff outside of the university and making their own money. And that's usually why they don't even bother with looking for grant money, because they can just go start their own LLC and go make their own money. Arts and humanities is an interesting thing, because where I think that you can really move the needle for arts and humanities, having worked in that field for a really long time with the liberal arts and everything else, is you have to make it internally be something that's seen as, ooh, that person got an NEH, and then other people go, I'll go do it too. It's just human nature, right? And so if you give these validations and accolades to people who went out and did this extra work and got an NEH or an NEA or a Knight Foundation, or whatever, any other type of thing, The other ones are going to follow along. They're just going to, at least they're going to want to try or look at it. But if somebody goes and gets a $500,000 grant and it's like the third byline on some newsletter, you're never going to get incentive to anybody else who wants to do it. And that can't always fall on development. That has to do with your communications team, marketing, has to do with the leadership within the college itself. And also the expectation of going and getting a grant as part of the promotion and tenure process. If it's just not part of the promotion and tenure process, you have really no other leverage to get somebody to go do it. You really don't.
And that, I think that was fantastic, Jeannie. Something else I neglected to mention earlier is that you reminded me of is that it matters, that it wows. And here at UCF, the institutional leadership cares a lot about making sure that they're supporting the research and scholarship in all areas across campus. And so there's a number of internally funded programs that specifically go out of their way to make sure that the funding is being distributed equitably to the various areas across campus. So they consider the number of faculty members and their amount of research that's being brought to it when they're allocating budget to these internal programs, to make sure and to give opportunity for those colleges to put in matching budget as well. So we've had collaborative partnerships with several colleges where they basically are going to get funded research to have that pilot data in order to leverage for larger opportunities. And so we're involved in the mix to make sure that what they have is competitive and is strong in terms of beyond the scope of the university. So we try to work closely with the awardees in that too.
Yeah. Maddie put in there your link to the workshops you do for arts and humanities. And, you know, and I guess I want to take a little step back and say that it's not like all like, oh, well, can't really help you because you all don't want to help yourselves. I mean, I don't want to make it sound that draconian. I mean, the reality of it is that I will help faculty in the arts and letters. I've done workshops before specifically for them. But the difficulty has more to do with not only, it's not the range in the humanities, has to do with the range in funding, because an NEH proposal is not an NEA proposal, is not this proposal. The formatting, the content, the scope, it's all very nuanced. And, you know, if you teach somebody how to write an NSF proposal, they can churn that out and out and out and out, same as NIH, and you can churn it out. It's a little bit more difficult in the humanities where funding might come from different sources and everything else. Oh, cool. She's plugging us. There's research development. Yay. But, you know, I steer away from getting too specific with humanities. Again, I work really close with the associate deans of research, and our ADR that's in arts and letters, she has moved mountains and gotten faculty to apply for things that they never, ever would have applied for in the past. And she does an enormous amount of work trying to recognize the work of our faculty. And it's paid off, because in the 4 years that she's been really just churning it out, we have somebody who's gotten 3 NEH awards, 3, one person. That right there is like mind blowing. And promoting her and being able to say, look what we did, because we got a summer institute, she got a faculty stipend, and she got something else. That's like almost unheard of, to be triple funded by NEH. So, you know, I think it really depends on the leadership locally at where the faculty are. I can't really do too much else other than that.
And we try, we work with the communication department. We don't do it, but we work with them and showcasing winners from the various colleges on campus to like you had said, Jeannie, to put light on them. And we try to recruit exemplars of seeking and securing research funding in their areas to speak in the series that we deliver. I was one of the speakers in the workshop that Maddie shared in the grant writing tips. And the way I approached that talk was very different from the way I approached the NSF grant writing tips talk. Even though it seems like it's the same content, it was quite different. It was much more attention to considering the audience, considering how you're approaching, with very much who you're talking to and who you will be submitting to. And so if you develop content like that, it's good to consider the sorts of funders they're going to be going for and what would best equip them for that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. Because it's really somewhat the same material, but it's just shared in a different capacity for the faculty that are doing it. But thank you for all the questions that are coming. We're happy to answer anything else. I would like to add too, so because we're all research administrators, development. We like to talk about the horror stories, if you will. So here's a great example. I have a faculty member I worked with a long time ago at one of my former institutions, and just trying to find him money to develop a public archaeology lab. And that was not easy to do. And this is going back into the day. And remember, I've been around a while. Don't let the gray hair fool you. The earmarks were a big thing. And you still kind of had to write earmarks in a way that kind of like made it sound like, yeah, you wanted to give us this money. So we got money to do a public archaeology lab. And in writing the proposal, we already know we're getting the money, but in writing the proposal, you almost had to kind of like work backwards. And I had this faculty member, it was like, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to get this old hotel and we're going to move the hotel onto campus because, you know, it's historic. And I'm staring at him and blinking because I'm thinking, I don't like even understand, like, how do I even convince somebody, first of all, that you can't do that? But the other thing is, how do we write it vague enough so that we don't hold ourselves accountable to moving a hotel? Luckily, we never did that. We actually built a brand new building. But, you know, from a horror story standpoint, is getting somebody who wants to write a proposal because they feel like that's the way it needs to be written. But then they keep coming back to you. Does this sound okay? And I'm like, for the 40th time, no, it does not sound okay to me. And then what's worse is getting the ones that write it their way and still get funded. But, you know, that is truly the nature of our business. We can't always control what people want to fund. Josh, do you have horror stories of that in development?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And even just in the context of providing review feedback, there are ways to do it very wrong, and there are ways to do it that will make people mad at you. And there are ways where you've done it perfectly and they take your advice and it produces new problems once they've taken it. And there are times when it's just like fantastic when it gets to the end of it. And so I think a challenge that I've had is, especially with somebody who I haven't read for, is building trust with them that what I'm doing isn't correcting their paper, even when I was doing the editing, like just the editing parts. It was like, I'm not grading your paper and I'm not telling you what's wrong with it, but I had to just develop a style of giving feedback that was well received by the people I was giving it to, because I learned right after I'd been here about 2 years that I made one person really mad because I had said, hey, I'm an editor here at UCF, and I'd love to, you know, assist if you have any proposals that need editing. I'm happy to help with that. And that's all I said. It was almost verbatim that. And they told me 2 years later that they thought I was telling them that they had poor writing and that they needed my help. And so I had to learn how to do that. And I was like, I was mortified. And they said, well, we like you now, but now that I know what you mean. So I was mortified at the time. But that really gets to like the overall aesthetic that research development tries to present. I think research administration broadly tries to do this too. You know, as a vision, our combined industry is to help reduce administrative burden and secure funding for our institutions. I think that's well understood. But then also in our particular area, we're trying to show an abundance of support and resources as they're developing their proposal. So that's really what we try to do.
Yeah, I think there isn't a research development person out there who hasn't been somewhat accosted by a faculty member that says, you know, especially if the grant wasn't successful, well, you told me to write it this way. And you kind of look at them and you kind of go, do you really think that because you had a dangling participle that somehow, some way it was my fault on that? You know, you can't really say that out loud, you know, but I'm saying it in the group of my peers right now. You know, it has nothing to do with, you know, being able to say that and sometimes I did feel responsible in the beginning with like research development. I felt like if I'm advising them to write a proposal in a particular way and they didn't get it, somehow I had some responsibility to that, because it's not like pre-award where, you know, you're telling the faculty member, if you don't write it this way, it will be returned without review, right? So that's a black and white kind of a thing. It has to go in that way. The faculty member says, no, cram it through, and then it gets returned without review. And, you know, you can kind of sit back and go, well, maybe it was because I told you to do it with compliance. but the nuance of writing, it just seems to be like you're trying to get somebody's idea to be clear. It's clear in their head, but they just can't get the verbiage down. And that's frustrating, because I'll sometimes feel responsible, like in terms of getting that language just so. But I take it all personally. No, I don't take it personally. I don't take it. What is the, oh, we're still on moving houses, by the way. Sorry about that. We tried to move a whole hotel, not lying. It was supposed to be actually barged in off of water. We're going to move it over water and barge it onto the campus. It was, yeah, I'm like, no, we're just going to build it. It was fine.
I will say a unique challenge research development has, I think, is when we are brought in to help support a late stage developed proposal, because by that point, an awful lot of time has been invested into developing the idea, the teams, securing information, and we're limited by some of the things we could have done to assist along the way, like some of the examples we gave earlier in the talk about gathering information about how well do, we're a minority serving institution over here, how well have minority serving institutions performed in here without an outside collaborator? The data will bear that out. But if I tell them to that and it's due, in 4 weeks, how much change can happen that would actually be an actual improvement to the overall proposal. And so a challenge are supporting late stage, and you have to make the hard calls about what can I help now and what can I help later. And so trying to get people to call us as early as possible. Searching funding opportunities is nice, but having those ideation conversations, those like, tell me about your research, tell me about what you want to do, that is so valuable. And so but it takes time. It takes time for people to trust you, to reach out to you, and for you to know that they're ready and looking for something. It's tricky.
Along those lines, Josh, have you experienced, like, when you've gotten a late stage proposal and it's already pretty much like, it's pretty much 80-90% done? Have you been able to turn the ship around? Like, can you give me an example where you've gotten a really, like, you're like, whoa, where is this thing going? And were you able to get them to do rewrites?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. An example that you talked about a little bit in our talk before was about like things like broader impacts. That is critical, but is often thought of at a late stage, where talk about, well, who's going to care about this when it's done? That's an area that you can make a significant improvement to the quality of it. I've also made some good inroads sometimes where we say, you have 6 pages of solid text. Can we please put a graph or an image or a table just to break this up visually? It is difficult to read from that perspective. But when it gets to like the idea doesn't seem to fit the scope of the program, then what I would do, what I have done in those cases is I say, not to say this doesn't seem to fit, but to say things like, I was looking at this and I noticed in the guidelines, it says quote from the guidelines. So it's not me talking, it's the guidelines saying it. And I say, I did see this, and I wonder if it would be possible to add this element to strengthen alignment with the program for the reviewers. If I say something like that, they're more willing to consider it, but then it's a matter of, can I free up some time or assist in doing that? And so if I make a suggestion like that, it's either something they can do with the time remaining, or it's something I can help them do, like gathering information about our STEM programs, because, that's a component they hadn't, put into it. So sometimes you can make that, sometimes you can't.
It's almost like we need our own little, like, when we say this is what we mean.
Also, I think this is important, and we didn't mention this, but the analytic or the reporting structures for development are idiosyncratic to your institution. So it's easier to track submissions, errors, awards and declines. It's more difficult to say, did this intangible training lead to downstream improvements in their funding competitiveness? It's a challenge to do that. It really is. And it also gets confusing when those late stage proposals are mixed in with the ones who I helped from day one. And so I think it's important, if this is an area you work in or an area you're considering working in, is have a system where you can capture positive feedback from the people you're supporting, saying, did this help, or keep those emails where they say this was really helpful, this couldn't have happened without everybody putting in all this effort. But make sure that what you promise is not more money or more proposals, because you can't control their ideas. You just can't. And so make sure that what you are doing is you're clearly enhancing their capacity to go for things competitively, and you can demonstrate that to leadership.
And I know that somebody was going to be doing metrics too at FRAC. And I want to also point out that what I did when I first got here was I did a super deep dive on the metrics that we were doing. And anybody that we helped, I wanted to have an average amount of time we worked with that individual. What was the scope that we were working? Was it editing, ideation? Was it collaboration? And I tracked it. I tracked it super close. And what I found was maybe a single-digit improvement in proposals that were funded. Now, how do you go about that metric? Because the people who were coming to me are people who needed my services, as opposed to people who already knew how to write weren't coming to me. So where we found where there was far more of a need that you can't put a metric to, were people using the office services for large scale proposal management stuff. And to me, if you're going to start getting lost in the whole metrics of, is this arm or is this service valuable, you're kind of losing the point of what research development will do. Because is there a way to put value on that we coached somebody in a writing process where now their journal articles are being accepted at a higher rate? There's no way to really pinpoint things like that. So it's a really hard thing to get your mind wrapped around of whether or not research development is a value added type of a thing. So I mean, I did the metrics here, and you just got to remember that you're dealing with a population of people who are going to use your services who already are seeking out your services. So you have to look at similar populations in order to determine whether or not you're doing a much better job. So when you look at it globally, I was only getting maybe a single-digit increase. When you look at their track record and whether or not they were more successful faster than other faculty, it was a little bit better. I don't have the stat with me, but again, we're talking about a small n, so the percentage doesn't work right. And I know I'm throwing math at everybody. I don't know how many people in here are like want to do the numbers, but you just can't, is the value of research development as a unit seen just because numbers go up in proposals funded? Well, then I think we're all missing the point. It can't just all be about the numbers when it concerns this. Josh, did you have other metrics that you were thinking of?
No, I think that's great. And we do like a detailed breakdown too, where we have categories of things that we're helping with. And we track that internally to see where interest is and where we need to change how we're offering or change and like add services or change services that we're doing. But no, I think that's really good. And I would just add that as I mentioned, there's a faculty fellow who's like a partner with our team. He's a physics professor, but he does a lot of mentoring and reads proposals a lot. And even though he's heavily involved in a mentoring program that seems to have demonstrated significant increase in funding, he would never take credit for that. I mean, he would say, this is due completely to the experts who are presenting great ideas, and we are contributing to their success. That's as far as he would go to accepting credit for that. And I think that's the right attitude with this, that, we can't control that, but we can help them to be successful. We can, in the movie analogy, right? Like, which parts of making the movie are you really, an expert in this case? Is the music just perfect? And the editing, oh, just right, but is the movie overall better? Yes. But is that the only thing that mattered in the movie? No. There's other things that also needed to come together for the success.
Exactly. I always liked your movie analogy, because again, you can spend a lot of money and time and energy on a movie and it flops at the box office, right? But then you got these little indie flicks, right, that they spent like $50,000 and like they become a box office smash. Why? Because it has to do with what we in research development can't always get to. It has to do with the idea, right? it's crafting the right idea, it's presenting the idea in a right way, and you can have the same idea presented two different ways, and somebody will fund this, but not this. You know, Josh and I now, well, we really shouldn't, I guess until we get the actual letter, we're going to be co-PIs on a funded project with Nova Southeastern and UNF. And so the amazing thing is when I look at the proposal, I'm like, what we're saying is something that I think that we always do anyway. And we're getting money for it. I'm like, yay, that's awesome. But you know, so I always laugh at, like, when I see a proposal that was poorly written, typos all over it, but gets funded because the idea was there, right? And somebody, especially a review panel who are experts in that field, say, this person is got, like, this is an incredible research idea. We need to roll with it. It goes with our program. So there's something to be said for also just coaching the PI on understanding whether or not what it is that they're asking to do is going to be in line with the funding. Is it the next up and coming thing? You know, I don't know the next up and coming thing. I can go look at what's being funded out there and try to align it with people that I know are doing things. That's also part of development. It's kind of that, Josh, I think you called it like sleuthing, or you called it something like that, looking at the field. And so we have to spend time doing that too. That's what it takes, a lot of time.
Yeah. And I mean, great ideas can be buried in a disorganized proposal. And if anybody reads anything, the first thing they check when they're reviewing it is the spelling. So it matters to some degree for people. And so all of these things are really critical, but the idea has to be there. Alignment has to be there. And so we really try to focus our attention when we're doing grant support on those sorts of things.
Yeah, I have another question too for your office. Do you work closely, like, with, I don't know how UCF has it structured. Do you work closely with like an international arm when you're doing international collaborations, or is it more about just working with your UCF folks, and if they're doing an international project, you find out about it that way?
The latter, yeah. We focus most often with the researchers themselves. And then we will sometimes connect with those offices. We have had some times where we've had to direct them to offices because they're seeking those sorts of things.
Okay. Yeah, we're starting to do more things with, like, trying to create collaborations with institutions and countries, and then trying to get their faculty to talk to our faculty, kind of like meet and greets virtually, and then trying to get them all to get together to write a proposal. So just trying to drum up international interest more than letting it do it organically, or having a faculty member going, I'd like to do something international. And so we have partners that way. Does anybody else have any other questions or any thoughts? Because lunch gets over at 12:45, and I want to make sure I give everybody time to either check their email or do other things. So quiet. Should we play Jeopardy music?
Crickets are all right.
Good.
Well, thank you everybody for listening and for the great questions. Oh, we have a couple more questions just came in. Okay, one quick question on tracking and metrics, measurable things, 2 piece admin ones. Yeah, that's good. So a nice metric, one of the ones we have here is we connect with a percentage of our overall research faculty annually. And so we say, are we connecting with them to support them with whatever they're needing? So there is a touch point with them. And that's something that we've had for several years as a metric. And so whether that's through workshops or through searching for funding or for helping them with proposals, you know, we track what the specifics are, but we know a percentage of our overall faculty and a subset, a percentage of our early career or new faculty members that we're working with in support. But that's a good measure because that's something that you do have a lot of control over.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the sheer number of people that you've trained, because the metric shouldn't be outcomes based, because there's no way for us to be tied to an outcomes based thing. So that's a good metric, Josh. I like that one. Just like touch points and how many, you know, and even if you talk about, you know, I tried to get down to the nitty gritty of like how many hours are spent on editing these proposals. But, then you start turning into, like billable hours in a law firm, but, if you start doing it that way. But that's a really good metrics just to say, how many people did you reach? Much like the early career academy. And I also try to make sure the metric is understood by those that are participating or coming and using our services. So if at the end they come and they want something and then they disappear on me, I still count them as kind of a metric, but I also try to hold people accountable. And sometimes that can be seen as almost like a little passive aggressive, I know, but I'm not your end all be all. You came to me for a reason. I want to help you, but I want you to find the help that's most appropriate to you. So sometimes I'm like, do you have a research mentor? Have you spoken to your department chair about it? Well, no, I just wanted to ask, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, well, they're just wanting to kind of bounce something off of me, I guess. You can still count that as a touch point as far as a metric. So when you say appease an administration, to me, then, Jessica, what you're asking is that apparently administration has a problem and that you have to appease them, like you have to, sacrifice a virgin on the volcano. I don't know. So I guess it depends on what they need to be appeased for.
And I see Amy put in the chat a very insightful comment here at our prior institution, the metric of 100% substantive contact, well tenure track faculty, and it depended on where they were at. And I think that's exactly right. This should be responsive to the needs and the resources available. That's what this particular area is about, and not saying, well, you've been here 30 days, that means it's time for your funding, and now you've been here 90 days, it's time for your first template, and now you've been here, 3 months, 7 months, and now it's time for your first proposal. You can't prescribe that. It doesn't work like that in our area.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I like the point of anything that is keeping faculty engaged in the process of going after research, I think is a win on any institution, right? And, the metric that I'd always heard about was, 20% of your faculty are bringing in 80% of your money anyway. And most of those that are bringing in the money aren't ones that you'll never have to talk to. So there's this, when you look at the bell curve of all your faculty, you're really only looking at a particular slice anyway. You're not looking at all faculty, right? Because you can't, there's no way to do it. I mean, you offer it, but you need to be able to focus on where you can maybe move a segment of that population, even if it's up one tick, if you will. Like, well, they at least looked at something, or they at least wrote something. That to me is hugely successful, just in and of itself. Again, just getting them to write and be thinking about external funding is like sometimes just moving a mountain. So, linking that though, you just cannot link it to anything. You can't link it to success. You can't link it to anything other than what it is. Total population, your faculty, how many used your services. That's pretty much about all you really can do.
And I'll add, I'll put on my tech comm hat for a second here. Any data presented is rhetorical in nature. So if you say number of submissions, number of awards, you're implying something by presenting it that way. And I think it's important if development is something that you're a part of and you're looking at metrics, to get ahead of the conversation and present the variables that you can stand behind, that these are data points that are reasonable, that are accurate, and that paint a true picture of what we're doing in line with the university or institutional goals. Because someone on the outside will say, you're the money people, right? What's the increase on money, and how many of those people did you get? And that's not unfair for them to ask that, because how do they know that's not aligned exactly with the principles and philosophy of research development? So I think setting those expectations are really important, so that you're presenting data that makes sense and is fair.
Well, it goes even with just research administration. It's an age-old thing with when it concerns research administration. We are a service body. We ensure compliance, we support, but we do not at all generate the research idea or the money. And so to say, oh, we're so successful because we now have 25 million in research expenditures, has zero to do with being a research administrator. Zero to do it. It has to do with the quality of the research that's being done by the faculty. Just plain and simple as that. So, with that, I would say, you just have to, like you just said, with the metrics, you just have to explain, what does that data point really mean? And I know it's hard with certain administrative types and certain boards, and they really don't want to know the background per se. They want to just hear that bullet point. I'm happy to give them a great slide that looks awesome. It makes me look great. And now if you're going to ask a question, then I'll go, well, this is what that means. Now, if you really want to know what the real data is, this is what it is. So thanks for asking that question, Jessica.
Mhm. A good place to do that. I know some research development offices will do like an annual kind of newsletter or report on like wins for the year. And they'll talk about those things because that will remind people what they do, remind them that they exist, and show them the value in doing that, and show the value to leadership in a way that is easily digestible. And so an annual kind of report on wins that isn't data centered, but is centered on what you can talk about as a win for your organization is a good idea, even if it's just something that goes on your site. And it's like, when they go to my site, they can see our 2021 report, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Well, I think we only had 5 minutes left, so I guess we can wrap it up here. And thank you to everybody who sat munching on their lunch, listening to us talk back and forth, and for the questions. But always happy to answer any questions offline or share anything. So just feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Oh, Stephanie.
No problem. Just going to wrap it up here. That concludes our lunch and learn session today. Thank you very much, Jeanne and Josh, for a wonderfully informative Q&A session and presentation earlier today. Thanks as well to everyone who attended and participated. Our next session will begin at 1 p.m. with Jeffrey Warner and Rebecca Haynes from UCF's Contracts Office. Their session is titled Unfunded but Essential. We hope you enjoy the rest of your time at FRAC. Bye now.